have stories of the dead coming back
to life to tales of the dead.
Evil.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
The All-American Spookshow.
Hello, once again, welcome to the All-American Spookshow Podcast, Top 13 Favorite Horror Films Countdown, Halloween 2019 edition. This is our number 10 favorite movies in the countdown. You'll hear mine, then you'll hear Will's, and then you'll hear the Professor Smoak's, number 10. And don't forget to come back each day at 8 p.m. where we will be counting down each day until we get to Halloween on October 31st, obviously 2019, where you'll hear our number one favorite horror films of all time. These aren't necessarily the best movies all time, which I think honestly they are, but it's just our personal favorites for sure. And there are plenty of good ones that end up on the list. So I guess that's about all I can say right now. So here it goes with my number 10 in the countdown.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Don't touch that!
My number 10 on the countdown is the true classic from 1931, Frankenstein. It was directed by James Whale, who also directed The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, a handful of others. I mean, he was very instrumental in this early, or the Universal monsters and these types of movies back in the 1930s and 40s. It stars Colin Clive as Dr. Henry Frankenstein, Mae Clark, and of course, the man who played the monster, Frankenstein's monster, Boris Karloff, who is one of the preeminent figures in all of horror history, for sure. This one's always been a personal favorite of mine. I mean, plenty of the movies that he was in, including Bride of Frankenstein, some may argue was an even better movie than the original Frankenstein. This one's always held a special place in my heart. I've always enjoyed it. The way it was shot, an awesome story. I guess a great adaptation of Mary Shelley's classic novel, Frankenstein. So this, for all these reasons, and just the sentimental value of watching this when I was younger with my parents and everything, this Frankenstein finishes number 10 on my list here in the countdown.
In the dark of the night, something strange is going on.
Movie, Night of the Living Dead.
Sure.
They ship those bodies. Well, say hello.
The dead have risen from the grave.
Mister, there's 100 of those things out there.
How many did you say?
100?
And now the question is, how do we get them back into the ground?
Bert, Frank, we have a little problem.
4 left. 10 right.
That goddamn chemical! It's all over everything! Stupid asshole! Watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job! Like this job! Brain!
Medical science is baffled.
It's a puzzle, because technically, you're not alive.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
How do you kill something that's already dead?
Well, how do I know, Fred? I don't know. Let me think.
It's not a bad question, Bert.
In that movie, they destroyed the brain to kill him. Is that what they did?
The brains, right?
Brains!
Brain! The brain! I hit the brain! Oh! Get it off! 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 Get it off!
The military is nervous.
How was your day?
Usual crap.
The police are confused.
Send more cops.
It worked in the movie! Well, it ain't working now, Brain. The movie's line!
It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert. It's not a bad question, Bert.
The return of the living dead.
Return of the Living Dead, man. This is such a fun movie, and I've come to realize while doing the podcast, I think I really enjoy horror comedy. I've also got like personal history with this movie. If you listen to the podcast, growing up, we moved when I was about 5 years old, and then the house that we move into is within a couple hundred feet away from a cemetery. Me being 5 and sneaking off and watching this while my parents were getting us moved wasn't a good idea. But yeah, man, this is such a good movie. If y'all haven't seen this yet, absolutely go watch it. It's fun. It's hilarious. It's a great movie. Also, watch out, Bert.
You have killed. And you will kill again.
You're getting closer and closer to the most unnatural kind of death. Beyond shock.
What was that?
Beyond horror into total terror. Murder runs wild. Blood runs cold. Deep red.
The conjecture is that an act of bloodshed was once committed in that house.
What is it?
Didn't you hear that?
No, what was it?
I don't know.
Everywhere you look. Everywhere you turn. Death is running with you.
It'll put you into deep shock.
This is Smoak, the Professore, and this is my number 10 pick. If you're wondering why I said that in Italian, it's because, well, you guessed it. It's another Italian horror film, because I can't get enough of that spaghetti splatter. This is a 1975 movie called Profunda Rosso, or as it's known in most English-speaking countries, Deep Red. It was directed by Dario Argento, and he's one of my favorite directors. I could have went with a number of different movies for this list, and I know Will's going to be severely disappointed when he learns I didn't choose Suspiria, because I know how much he loves that one. But no, I went with Deep Red. I think it's a prime example of the Italian subgenre known as the giallo, and this movie definitely pushes all the right buttons for a giallo. Hyper-stylized violence. It's basically a whodunit thriller, twist ending, red herrings, black-gloved killer. You know, it's got all the right things that a giallo should have that were not necessarily cliche at the time this came out in 1975. Argento had actually directed 3 giallo films before this one, and he's not the originator of the giallo genre. Some people think he is, but it's actually Mario Bava that made some of the first giallo films. But Dario Argento made 3 before he got to Deep Red, and then they were known as his Animal Trilogy, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Four Flies on Grey Velvet. Well, not that, I don't know, flies aren't animals, are they? They're insects. But whatever, still known as the Animal Trilogy. But by the time he got to Deep Red in 1975, he had honed his abilities at making giallo films, and I think it's one of the ultimate giallos. If you haven't seen a giallo film yet, or you've heard of them and you're thinking about getting into watching some of them, you should probably make Deep Red your first one, because once you see that, if you don't like Deep Red, then you probably won't like too many other ones beyond that. And again, I'm not saying Deep Red is the ultimate giallo film of all time, but it is up there in that list, and I think it's earned its right to be in there. Also, should mention the excellent soundtrack from Goblin. This is their first movie that they did a soundtrack for, and it's that pulsating, synth-driven, progressive rock soundtrack that will stick in your head, as any Goblin soundtrack will. Argento is at the top of his game with this film. His choice of camera angles and movements are very interesting and innovative. Also, the cinematography and the editing are excellent, and the movie moves along at a good pace. Sometimes, I mean, being a huge fan of the giallo films and having seen quite a few of them, I can tell you some of them will drag in points. It's just the nature of the genre. But I think Deep Red manages to avoid that. It doesn't really drag on. I mean, it can be seen as a fairly long movie, but I think everything moves along at a good clip. There's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. Now, I first saw this movie in the VHS days under the title Deep Red: The Hatchet Murders, and it was cut up a little bit. You know, they trimmed it out for an R rating, some of the more gruesome aspects of the violence. Also, it being on VHS, it was pan and scan, you know, seeing a square image cut off. And this is really not the way to see an Argento film. Even though I loved it at that time, whenever I finally got around to seeing it, again, like I said before in one of the other shows, in the Cannibal Holocaust segment, I discovered tape trading, VHS tape trading, through the mail order, and I got a copy of Deep Red that way too, which was taken from a Japanese Laserdisc. And Japanese Laserdisc was widescreen, letterboxed, and that is the only way to really watch an Argento movie, because he uses every frame of that when he composes his shots. So whenever I saw it like that, uncut and in widescreen, it was like seeing a whole nother movie. Great film, again. If you haven't seen it, I definitely highly recommend Deep Red.
So there you have it. That's our number 10 favorites, all in a row there for you. Be sure to come back tomorrow for our number 9 favorite movies on the Top 13 Favorite Horror Films Countdown, Halloween 2019 edition. We thank everybody for checking us out. Be sure to go find the All-American Spookshow Podcast and all the normal places you go find your podcast. Give us a good review. Give us a 5-star review. It helps out the cause. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you listening. Be sure to come back tomorrow for the next on the countdown. We are the All-American Spookshow Podcast. Have a good one.